Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
In just a matter of seconds, you're going to hear a classic episode of this show from back in the day when we called ourselves Movies We Like.
It took us a while to settle into the show's format, so you'll notice some differences as you listen to these episodes. For instance, it takes us a bit of time to actually get into the conversation about the movie. Things like that.
But we're still proud of the conversations about the movies themselves, and we think they're worth keeping in the library.
So enjoy these episodes from our back catalog. And you can become part of our Discord community, learn more about the show, and find out how you can become a supporting member at thenextreel.com.
So thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to The Next Reel. We appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you enjoy the show. Boom. How about that? Tell me about Wreck-It Ralph.
I loved it. It was fantastic.
It was? Really?
It was. It was great. I loved just the whole world of, inside all the video games. And, it's just it was a clever conceit how they're kind of all connected through the power line and video game characters can go, hang out and go into different games and all that. It was really well written, great characters, and I was really happy to see that it was actually done so well with such, solid character development and a really great story.
Well, okay. Now I'm gonna go with the kids to see it shortly, but this was now last week. You made the distinction between Pixar and Disney animation. That this is a Disney animation film,
right?
Ostensibly, what is the difference anymore?
Well, it still is considered different. I mean, it's like saying a film released under Touchstone is a Disney film. It's under the same umbrella, but by having the different distinction, it allows them to essentially kind of release different types of films and have different people involved. And it really is all about the people involved. But, Splash, when that was released under Touchstone back in 1984, that was Disney's attempt to create a new type of film that they could make, excuse me, that didn't necessarily feel like a typical what you'd call a Disney film. It could be a little more adult. There could be some more adult humor, PG rating, nudity, whatever it was. They could do something a little different while it was still under the same umbrella. And same thing with Pixar. And I mean, Pixar, they did end up kind of merging into Disney, but it is run by a very different set of people. And, they have a very distinct set of, I guess, whatever you'd call kind of the Pixar guidelines. Now, that being said, John Lasseter is heading up the current Walt Disney Animation Studios, and with him leading the charge with all the good number of recent ones. I mean, he definitely was behind a lot of the storytelling elements and is on Wreck-It Ralph as an executive producer, but really it's a different group of people managing the film and making it. And so you're right, ostensibly it's all kind of under the same umbrella and it's animated films coming out of the castle, but it's not necessarily just a Pixar film with the Pixar group of people behind it. This is a Disney film with the Disney people behind it.
But I guess my only point is I think we could see there's a kind of a radical transition when John Lasseter became more involved at Disney and less involved in the daily activity at Pixar. The movies at Pixar, I think have it'll be interesting to see what happens with some of these prequels that are coming out. But I think Lasseter's influence on Wreck-It Ralph, at least from what I've seen in the trailer, is very apparent. And his absence from direct day-to-day activity on some of the other current Pixar films is also notably apparent. That said, I think it's an interesting find in director Rich Moore. I'm interested to see this movie. I'm going, a little bit later to see it with the kids. Here's a guy who came from, TV, and this is his first big movie, it looks like. And it's one of my very favorite films, or a very favorite series, Futurama. Comes off of Futurama, so I'm very excited to see kind of what he does with it. If it stands up, I think what we're seeing is the blurring lines between Disney and Pixar, and I hope for more of that Lasseter influence than less, because I'm not sure that it's one of those. It's almost dirty to say it, but it's sort of the Steve Jobs effect. You want to see what that visionary effect is going to have on these individual films.
Well, and it's definitely been apparent in all the Disney animated films released since he came on board, whether it was a theatrical release or a straight to DVD release. I have sat through all the Tinkerbell films, the straight to DVD Tinkerbell films with my daughter, and I've been surprised every time, going, God, they really could have probably done a theatrical release with this. It's actually so much better than I ever would have given it credit for one of my least favorite Disney characters ever created.
It doesn't even seem like a character. It's like a punctuation mark.
Exactly. That's what Tinkerbell always was, and I always hated her. And then they made these films, and I'm like, gosh, I actually like Tinkerbell now, and I never thought I'd say that. And I mean, if you look at the DVD results, I mean, they clearly know what they're doing. John Lasseter clearly knows that making a good story and creating good characters and just making a well-made film is really how you make money, regardless of whether it is theatrical or not. Because The Secret of the Wings, the latest Tinkerbell DVD that just came out, is like the top of the sales right now. I mean, it's doing gangbusters, and I'm not sure if they were expecting that or not, but I mean, it really surprised me when I saw it way up there. And my daughter's already watched it like 5 times in the last week. So, I mean, obviously they know what they've tapped into with that. So it's good storytelling.
I'm going to say this out loud, and I know nothing will ever happen with it, but I just want to put it out there almost as a dare. I think we need to have a new list for the website, and it's going to be Andy's favorite Tinkerbell DVD movies. It'll be right next to our list of famous composers that start with a J.
The most obscure lists ever. I guarantee you won't find those on anyone else's.
No, you will not. Just wait for our list page to go live. Well, that's fascinating. I'm excited to see it. Assuming my kids get their homework done, that is going to be the prize of the day.
I don't have to worry about that yet with a 6 and a 2-year-old.
Oh, goodness.
As long as they eat their dinner, they got to go.
The bar changes. The bar changes. So that's fantastic. I'm excited for it.
And I bet. I mean, Argo has held the top spot at the box office for the last like 3 weeks or so. It's done really, really well at the box office, and it has beat out everything else that's come out in the last 3 weeks. But I bet that Wreck-It Ralph is probably going to be the film that knocks it out. Maybe Flight. Actually, both of those films probably are going to push Argo out this week. But
I don't know. Flight's not doing all that great, and but Wreck-It Ralph is blowing the doors off in the IMDb popularity. It's
Wreck-It Ralph. I mean, it was jam packed last night. It was completely full. There were a lot of people at the waiting in line to see Flight as well, but obviously Flight is just going to be adults, whereas Wreck-It Ralph, I mean, that's definitely one you can bring the whole family to.
Well, judging by my highly scientific, empirical browsing of my Facebook list, Facebook timeline, a lot of people are talking about Wreck-It Ralph, and adults talking about the joy they get out of seeing these really well done kids films, or family films, I should say. And I haven't seen one person mention a single thing about Flight.
Yeah.
If that says anything.
Well, Facebook has all the answers.
It does. It does have all the answers. Interesting that Cloud Atlas is still sort of holding its own. You think that's picking up speed?
This is a sign of that slow burn that we're talking about. It actually has grown. It hasn't dropped off as far as the money coming in. It's actually been increasing, and so I think it is going to kind of end up being a little bit of a slow burn. So
I'm glad for that film. As much as I was. I don't know how you would characterize my feeling toward that film, but I'm excited to see it do well.
I have a feeling that Cloud Atlas is going to be a film that kind of grows in people's moves up on their like lists over time as it settles with them and they see it.
Yeah,
a few more times.
Yeah. No. I
can't wait to see it again.
I buy that. Where can people find you, please?
People can find me at ifindyourlackoffaith.com.
Yes, they can.
And on Facebook at our Movies We Like page.
Yes, indeed. You can find me at PeteWright.com or make sure to visit the show at rashpixel.tv. Subscribe to the show on iTunes, and if you have a second, please deliver us a favorable rating. Please, if you're listening to the show, we hope you find it favorable enough to rate it favorably in the iTunes. It helps other people discover it, and we sure appreciate all the stars on which you bestow the show. Okay, what else do we have to talk about? Do you have trailers we should talk about today? We haven't even talked about trailers.
We haven't even talked about them, so I'm not sure if I should bring any up. There's a new G.I. Joe trailer out.
G.I. Joe Retaliation.
Yeah.
I got a lot of joy out of the first G.I. Joe, I'll tell you what.
I got a lot of joy out of reading the script for the first G.I. Joe.
I love G.I. Joe. Why? So you didn't like the movie?
I didn't not like it. It just was, I guess it was just very by the books, and, it delivered what it was set out to deliver. I just, Yeah, I guess I was hoping for more, although I don't know why I should have been hoping for more with a G.I. Joe film.
Yes, hope for less and you will be thrilled.
That's right. That's right.
Always hope for
My
less.
bar was set way too high.
These were my go-to toys, at just that right age. And there was that fateful day when the G.I. Joes, tried to hold the fort of my bed against an invasion by the Transformers, and actually lit my bed on fire. And that was a fateful day, and it wasn't toy fire, people.
Oh,
it was a fateful day for the Joes, and it was all because, you know what it was? Snake Eyes doesn't know how to take orders. He's always going off on his own.
that rogue.
Yeah. The thing is, I don't understand how the Millennium, the Millennium Wheel in London. I don't know how that thing's still around, because the Fantastic Four totally destroyed that thing. And there's a giant hole in the river right there because of the Silver Surfer. How are they able to do? How many times? London is becoming the new New York. How many times do we blow that place up in movies and it's still around?
Exactly. Well, they already destroyed the Eiffel Tower in the first G.I. Joe.
Yeah, that's right. They needed something new. All right, so let's. Shall we talk about this film?
Well, should we just say happy anniversary?
That's today.
That's today.
Andy, I forgot our anniversary. I'm so embarrassed.
What? No cod? You never remember.
It is. It's our anniversary. We've done it. We've been doing this for a year.
I know, a whole year.
We haven't missed a week.
No, it's been a solid year of,
in fact,
movie joy.
I think we've inserted a couple of weeks.
And hopefully for more than just us.
Well, that's a really good point. Thank you, everyone, for everyone who is listening to this, for joining us for these weekly discussions on movies. And I think if anything, at least when I go into this each week, I think our job is to introduce people to movies they potentially haven't seen or haven't seen in a long time. And if we're shining a light on some great movies that people need to see, then our mission is successful. So
definitely.
You have any additional words of wisdom?
It's always a great opportunity to talk about movies and talk about the art of film and the joy of film, and just it's a very exciting medium. And as we've talked about many times on the show, it's a medium that is always pushing the limits and pushing the boundaries, and you've got amazing artists working in it, always trying new things and coming up with amazing films because of it that live in our memory. And the whole conceit of our show is movies that we like, and talking about films that specifically are ones that we connect to. And it's a joy going back and revisiting these films and learning so much more about them and getting so much out of them. And I definitely hope that passion and interest and enthusiasm for the magical world of film is coming through. And I think that our audience is hopefully enjoying it. And I thank them all for being a part of our show and keeping us going.
Yes, I agree with that. Andy said his stuff better. Pretty much use what Andy said with my head, and we'll be fine.
That's what I was going to write on the card for you.
Okay, so today we are our anniversary episode is man, what a great film this was.
Yeah, truly.
This was I'm gonna go on the record. This film succeeded for me in all the ways that Bullitt failed, exclusive of the car chase. Even though the car chase, I think we'll talk about that. But this was, to me, a great story. And it's where I felt like Bullitt was a little bit lackluster.
You're definitely right. I think aside from the great car chase, which we definitely are going to talk about coming up here, they had a really interesting story, a story that made sense.
Yeah.
And it all tied so well together with a gritty realism and this kind of pseudo documentary vibe all the way through that really made you feel like you were tapped into this kind of grimy world of police on the streets tracking down drug dealers.
Yeah. And I think one of the most important things we can get from this movie is that we need friends with better nicknames.
Either that or we can call each other Popeye and Cloudy.
I've been thinking about the backstory that we'll need to invent so that I can effectively call you Popeye.
Yeah.
And people say, well, he killed a man in prison or something like that. Yeah.
That's right.
I don't know what he did, but the characters I think of this movie is another one of those in a period of particularly great firsts, and so just to kick it off, this is the first R-rated film to win an Oscar.
Yep. For
Best Picture. It won lots and lots of awards. Not lots and lots. It won the Wright Awards. 5 Academy Award wins: Best Picture, Philip D'Antoni; Best Director, William Friedkin; Best Actor, Gene Hackman; Best Adapted Screenplay; and Best Film Editing, the terrific editing work of Jerry Greenberg. Since we started off with Bullitt last week, the car chase last week. Let's start with the car chase this week. What do you think about the French Connection car chase? How it was put together, how it was architected, and the fact that it is actually a car chase between a car and a train?
Well, and that's, I think, what makes it stand out, right? I mean, when Philip D'Antoni, the producer of this, was kind of doing location scouting and trying to figure out the car chase with William Friedkin, they were walking the streets of New York and they were talking about, okay, what can we do that's different than what they did in Bullitt specifically, because Philip D'Antoni also had produced Bullitt, and so he was very connected to the car chase in that film and obviously wanted to kind of continue with another great car chase here. So he and Friedkin actually walked New York. They walked like 50 blocks or something, just kind of looking around, trying to find the right streets and all the stuff that they could do something new and something different. The first thing that they kind of tapped into was they needed it to be in the city. This was a city full of people, and D'Antoni's initial reaction was, let's put it out. It goes outside of the city and it's out on the streets where we can move really fast. And Friedkin's like, there's all these people here. This is a city of people. We have to be in the city. So they were really trying to find that right spot. And as they were walking around, neither of them actually remember who came up with the idea, but they just remember hearing the train, the L, going above them. And they're like, that's a really interesting thing. It's so a part of the city. The L is all through here. And they came up with the idea, what if the car is chasing that? It has this interesting energy. The train makes this sound. It's like got its own beat as it's going along. It's kind of this driving force. It doesn't stop for traffic, all of this sort of stuff. And because of that, they came up with the idea of Popeye Doyle chasing the train and having to pursue it. And it came up with an absolutely fascinating idea of this chase that really, I think, stands the test of time, because you do have this car having to deal with other traffic and pedestrians and trash and walls and things that the train doesn't have to worry about. And it turns it into a totally different type of car chase where you're pursuing something that you can't just directly pursue. And it put a lot of interesting things in the way because of that. And it made for, I think, just one of the best car chases out there.
I absolutely agree. It's there's this sense of, it's kind of a different sort of sense of out of control of this chase. Because, but as you say, Popeye's chasing this thing that he can't he can't just get in front of and run off the road into a gas station. He can't just stop it. He is simply, at its mercy.
It's not like he can shoot the tires.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I think Gene Hackman, is one of the most exciting drivers to watch. His just sort of frenetic energy and his sense of the portrayal of his exhaustion at the end of this chase, when he gets out of the car and sort of stumbles from it. Once the train actually, sort of exhausts itself and runs into the end of the line, is one of the most sort of palpable kind of sweaty senses of completion, I think, at the end of this car chase that is that was really exciting to watch. I think it's funny to read. I was looking up at the Wikipedia page on the car chase, and it's interesting to read it in this context. So I'm reading from Wikipedia. Friedkin's plan included fast driving coupled with 5 specific stunts. Number 1, Doyle is sideswiped by a car in an intersection. Number 2, Doyle's car is clipped by a truck with a drive carefully bumper sticker. Number 3, Doyle narrowly misses a woman with a baby stroller and crashes into a pile of garbage. Number 4, Doyle's vision is blocked by a tractor trailer which forces him into a steel fence. Number 5, Doyle must go against traffic to get back on a parallel path with the train, intercut with these car scenes underneath the elevated train as additional footage, shots facing the car, not from the driver's perspective, shots from Bushwick, Brooklyn, particularly when Doyle misses a moving truck and slams into a steel fence. So Friedkin's plan included these 5 points. When read, in this, when read in this context, seems like this is going to be the most boring car chase ever. Right, and yet that transition from point and script to screen ends up being really powerful. What are your thoughts on making that transition, and particularly in the cinematography from Owen Roizman and Jerry Greenberg's editing that actually bring this to life?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. There's always a translation going from the script into actually physically doing it and making it really happen. And this was an example of the script that actually ended up having quite a bit of ad-libbing and reworking done while they were shooting. They would kind of rework scenes, and even my understanding is the car chase scene wasn't written out quite this way in the script, and a lot of it kind of came by happenstance. For example, the vehicles that clip Doyle as he's driving down the road, racing down, were completely unintentional. It was all supposed to be near misses. And that first car, the stunt driver accidentally I guess they weren't paying attention or whatever, and they pulled in too far, and they totally clipped the side of the vehicle. It worked really well. It actually ended up working really well. The dump truck, I'm not quite sure, or the garbage truck, I'm not quite sure if that one was an intentional one, but considering they said it was all supposed to be near misses, makes me think that it probably wasn't supposed to happen either. And then, swinging around the corner and crashing into the wall, Gene Hackman was really driving, and he wasn't intended to do that either. And he literally, took the car right into the wall. The actor driving drove it right into the wall. And just all that stuff. And then you take that, and by having those, happy accidents, I guess you could call them, on set, it made for a much more exciting bit of editing, and something that they could really bring with energy to the film. And the fact that they were filming all of this, it wasn't shot high speed or anything to make it look like they're driving faster. Undercranked to make it look like they were driving faster. They actually were driving a car going, like the master shot, they drove for 26 blocks, shooting, as fast as they could. And they were going like 90 miles an hour. Friedkin was shooting, actually, and they had a cop with them. They didn't close the streets off. They had some stunt drivers out there, but all the pedestrians were real pedestrians just kind of walking the streets. They completely did it illegally. They didn't have anything closed. They just, they had their stunt drivers in place to hopefully make it all work. And all they did to really kind of make it so it was kind of safe was they had one of those little police gumball lights, that they kind of magnetically just sit on top of the car. They had that going, and they had the siren wailing, and they shot the shot, and that's the only thing that kept all the other people out there, all the other traffic and pedestrians, aware that they needed to watch out for this car barreling down the road 90 miles an hour. So when you have a master shot like that, and then you get these shots of Hackman driving from the front and the side, and you get all of the shots of the train and everything else, you give that to the editor. He's got so much stuff to work with, and Friedkin actually said this was one of the easiest scenes in the film to edit because they had such great footage, and it all had an amazing energy, and you didn't need much more than that. And I think by the nature of the speed and the obsession that is driving Hackman or driving Doyle in this film, particularly in this scene as he's pursuing this train, that obsession just drives that scene. I mean, he's so obsessed with catching the killer, or catching the guy who is trying to shoot him, and it just builds to that amazing end, and you can't beat it. And I think because of the nature of film, it's always going to jump off the page more when you're shooting a scene like this rather than just reading it on the page like you were just doing.
Okay, two questions. The first one is, I think specifically referring to the front bumper shot. Mm-hmm. This is another one, and I don't know this is another one from the vast repository of all things that must be true, Wikipedia, that Roisman says in American Cinematographer magazine in '72 that the camera, I think he's referring to the front bumper shot, was undercranked to 18 frames per second.
Okay, gotcha.
But and I was going to ask you about that. What is that? I mean, at 18 frames per second, that when played back at 24, that makes everything faster.
Right. Yeah, everything would be slightly faster. It's it's 2/3 of what would that be? It'd be 2/3 faster or a third faster, something like that. So just enough to make it look that much faster. And they're also shooting with the lenses that obviously could make it look like we were going that much faster.
Right. There's that sense of kind of compression around us, and so that's. But I get the same thing that you do from Friedkin, who says we were barreling down these things at 90 miles per hour, and so I don't know what that necessarily means. I wish I had more specificity from Roisman on just how much of that was used, because it doesn't look like it to me. So
I'm not sure. It's just a lot of talk, and I think Friedkin being in the car, he probably has a different perspective than other people who were standing by the side of the road watching.
The other one is then the climax of this one. The car stops. He stops at an intersection, is right underneath the train, and then we have that legendary shot, so to speak.
A legendary shot of a legendary shot. Right. That is when Hackman shoots him in the back.
Shoots him in the back as he's running away. That was a controversial scene.
It was. There was a police officer, one of the many great police officers who was working with them on the film, Randy Jurgensen, who actually plays the police sergeant when Devereaux's trying to get his car out of the lockup. He was with them while he was kind of like their police guy with them and everything. And he came up to Friedkin and he's like, as they were rehearsing, he's like, it looks like this character is shooting an unarmed man in the back, which essentially is just making it, murder. It's turning, it's making this cop commit cold-blooded murder, essentially. I mean, he should be arresting him, he should be taking him in, but he shouldn't be shooting him in the back. And Friedkin's response was, it'll work. It's going to work. It's going to play right, and the audiences will love it. And Randy was really, really unsettled by it because a cop shouldn't be shooting anyone in the back, particularly an unarmed person, even if it was a criminal who was trying to shoot them. Now, fast forward to the premiere of the film. And Randy was sitting there nervously watching with the audience and Friedkin. And that scene plays, and the audience leaps to their feet and starts applauding. They were so thrilled that Doyle got his man and took this man down. Who, I mean, we had seen him. He was taking shots at him. We saw him kill the French cop at the beginning of the film. He's already killed 2 subway cops on the train and caused an accident and essentially killed the driver via heart attack. and he's getting off the train, and yeah, it's exciting when Doyle kills him. And yes, it is in the back, and yes, the guy's unarmed. But as an audience, we've been along for the ride with this, and it is thrilling to see him get his man. And Friedkin went up to Randy and said, it worked. And Randy's like, yeah, you're right. All of they never got any other complaints from any cops or anything. Everyone thought it worked. So I don't think a cop would get away with using the Doyle defense if they really pulled this.
Well, and doesn't that get to what is, at its really core, what's enjoyable about this film? And maybe it's enjoyable to, guys. Like, and I say that sort of the stereotypical kind of, because that's what I get when I watch this movie. I go to my guy place, right? Which is, I watch a cop do what needs to be done. This is like the Lethal Weapon kind of feeling, right? I watch this prototypical sort of man's man do what needs to be done to get his guy. And there are no politics and there are no policies. He just gets it. Yeah. And the cost of that is, watching him walk that ethical line in a sort of satisfying way. And the first time we see that is in the shot of Nikolai. The second time we see that, I think, play out in a questionable fashion is at the very end of the film.
Yeah.
We have this relationship established between Popeye Doyle and a federal agent, Mulderig, who was assigned to
Muldrig, right?
Muldrig.
Played by Bill Hickman, the stunt guy, the stunt coordinator for this film, who was also on Bullitt.
Right, we know from he was the hitman in Bullitt. And their relationship is contentious from the start. And at the end of the film, the climax of the film, our heroes are hunting the frog number one,
right,
through this warehouse, and stepping out of a shadow is a silhouette of somebody, and Doyle immediately responds by emptying his gun into that shadow. Right. And as they discover that it wasn't actually Frog One, it was the federal agent.
It was Muldrig.
It was Muldrig, and his reaction to that. They have a contentious relationship. Muldrig is kind of a jerk anyway.
Well, and Muldrig. I mean, rightly so. Muldrig is bitter about Doyle because Doyle has essentially done this in the past, where because of his obsessive nature, ended up costing another cop his life.
Right.
And so Muldrig is not a big fan of that.
And so what do you think of how this plays out? So the end of this sequence is Popeye. It plays out in Technicolor, right? He kills this cop, and his first reaction is to reload his gun and say, "Frog One is in this building. I saw him, and I'm going to get him."
Yeah. So
what do you think of this?
It's one of the most fascinating character portrayals of a cop that I have seen, and it's just amazing how, as upset as Russo, his partner, played by the wonderful top 70s actor Roy Scheider, as one of our 70s favorites, as upset as Russo is, and Russo, of course, his reaction is to kneel over the body and check for a pulse and everything, is like, you killed him. He's kind of horrified and shocked that Doyle just took Muldrig out. And then to see Doyle not even react to the fact that he killed him, but like you said, reload his gun. It all ties into this obsession that he has with getting his man. And the way the film ends just drives the point home that you never even know how this chase results, really. I mean, you do from like the title cards at the end, but the film leaves you with Doyle running through an empty building, disappearing in the shadows himself, and then this echoing gunshot that just rings out, and you have no idea really how, to what lengths Doyle is going to go to pursue catching this guy. And it's kind of this tragic story about this cop who just doesn't know how to let go, and it drives him to the point where it kind of takes away who he is, or I guess you could say it almost becomes who he is. And that's really all that's left of Doyle, is this obsessive, bitter cop. And it's a fascinating portrayal of Doyle versus Charnier, the Frenchman, Frog number 1, and how Doyle is kind of portrayed as this kind of this guy who has to live on the streets and is bitter and is kind of just an angry person and an obsessive person. He's a cop who he has to stand out in the cold, watching while the criminal sits inside eating, living a lush life. You know, the criminal is always one step ahead of him, it seems. I mean, even when you go to Doyle's house where Nicoli is shooting at him, the apartment complex that Doyle lives in looks like a prison. I mean, it's almost like he's created this life for himself that is his own prison. And he's locked into this obsession and he can't get out. And at the end, it doesn't matter really if he gets his man or not. It's just this tragic character that we're watching. And it really drives the point home so well at the end. And then when you do see the title cards and you see that Charnier was never caught and he's believed to be living back in France, it just goes to show how fruitless it is. And it makes it that much more tragic for Doyle.
And you wonder who he shot.
Yeah.
Right? That
Right.
one gunshot at the end, you have to imagine somebody else was at his mercy. And I think it is interesting in the title cards at the end. You also see that this obsession of Cloudy and Popeye in particular ends up being fruitless in another dimension. It leads to his reassignment out of narcotics. So here is a guy who has devoted his life to this character has devoted his life to to the fight of the narcotics trade, doing whatever he needs to do to do it. And it turns out whatever you need to do to fight the narcotics trade is too much. There is a point where you can go too far.
Yeah. And
we're seeing how the system does not account for whatever it takes.
Exactly.
We've talked a lot about just sort of the frenetic pace of the kind of third act, sort of from the chase on. But there is, I'm interested in your take on the very middle of the film, because I think one of the things that this movie does so well, as well as it does this, the car chase, the car train chase, it does the foot chase.
Which, I mean, it's one of the best scenes of the film.
It is one of the best scenes of the film. Would you talk about what you love about that?
This is another great example of editing and the way that it's shot, and also I think a huge part of this goes to Don Ellis's just fantastic score that he did for the film. It really has this quality that keeps you on edge, and it's there's this dissonance created in the music, and he's using like quarter-tone trumpets and all this interesting stuff, and this particular scene, he's got all these basses that I think he had 9 basses just kind of hitting these notes, this kind of pounding as Doyle is on foot following Frog 1 through the streets of New York. And it's so exciting because you know that they both know what's going on in this game. Charnier clearly knows that Doyle is following him. Doyle knows that Charnier knows that he's following him. And this actually happens all the way through the film, where both the cops and the bad guys are aware of the other. But it's as if they're both so convinced that they're the smarter man that they'll always be able to elude the other. And this scene is a perfect example of that, and how Charnier really has such a sense of Doyle and how to play him and how to elude somebody, and just that whole back and forth cat and mouse bit in the subway where it leads to Charnier pulling off in the train and Doyle, unable to get through the doors, just pounding on it, and he sees Charnier looking at him, acknowledging, yes, I know you've been there the whole time, and he gives him that condescending little wave. It just, I mean, that's one of the best exclamation points at the end of a scene, and you just can't get better than that.
I was watching this last night and thinking to myself, this is a scene in particular. What's going on here is, it's that great. I had never seen this in a movie prior to this, right? But since then it's happened. I can sort of recall movies where they've done this again, and I think French Connection really does it the best, where you have the one character who is trying to get away from the chasing police officer, and he keeps stepping on and off the train, trying to time it in such a way that the doors will close, and the other character will be trapped off the train, and that's exactly how it plays out in this film. And in this sequence, I found myself thinking this you could practically put a laugh track, a live audience to this film and get laughs in all the right places. Like, it is as serious and as sort of intriguing as the music is, and as that sort of energy. It's downright funny. It is funny. They do this so well, and as seriously as you can see Gene Hackman's obsession just boiling over. And that's what's so great about this, because he knows that Charnier's made him. He knows that he's chasing him sort of fruitlessly. He knows that he's not secretive. And at the end, he just boils over, and he just gives up all pretense. And that's what the energy of him chasing the train fruitlessly, knowing he's not going to be able to stop the train, but pounding on the doors, is the ultimate payoff to what ultimately is a 10-minute, sort of walking scene that leads up to that.
Yeah.
And I, to me, as good as that is, so is the execution of the sequence on the street, with all of the police officers who are kind of on this sequence trying to figure out who's going to walk after whom, right? And they keep doing that handoff as they walk the freezing streets of New York City.
Yeah, when they're following Sal Boca around.
Right.
And he keeps seeing them, and they know they've been made. And it's amazing watching that game as they, essentially, there's 3 of them out there, or 4 of them actually, or probably more for all we know. I think we only see 4. But yeah, one follows one, and then when he gets made, then the other kind of comes in, and it's a fascinating way to play this cat and mouse game.
Well, and it leads to Doyle standing across the street from a restaurant, watching Devereaux and Charnier eating escargot.
Right,
at a fancy restaurant
for like it feels like
for like 6 hours. Yeah, exactly.
It's like the longest meal ever.
It is the longest meal ever, and that that is that I thought was a really, to me, and others may find this not as interesting. To me, the sequence was exciting in its in the slow pacing that it maintained. Right. I mean, I think the intrigue of it is just watching these guys try not to be made, even though they had been made long ago. And I think that was just really expertly done and placed at a perfect point in the film, kind of right before things really pick up and don't stop until the end.
And it's a great, something else about the nature of this film with these scenes, and a lot of these scenes, is there's so much of it done with no dialogue. You're just watching the police procedural essentially done in a way that you really hadn't quite seen done in police procedurals before. And it's just so intriguing. I think that's why it did so well probably all around the world, is because it's you're watching the pictures, you're watching the images of these things happening, and you don't have to worry so much about the dialogue. And it really just made for just an absolutely fascinating film.
So moving, let's see. We haven't really talked about the story.
Yeah, which is based on a true story, which is based on an actual case that the 2 real guys that Doyle and Russo are based on, Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso, who both actually are in the film and actually continued starring in films and TV shows for years after this. I think after this, Eddie Egan was in like 20 plus movies and TV shows, always as kind of that cop character. He plays the captain in this film. But this film sets it up very much the same way. These cops who just have no matter whether they're on duty or off duty, they always are keeping their eyes open and they notice things. And it happens just the way it happens in this film. They're sitting in a bar and they notice this guy kind of spending money, and a guy who they hadn't seen before with some people that they did recognize. And their curiosity led them to follow him and essentially uncover this whole case of heroin coming in cars from France. And it's a really interesting case, and it's interesting the parallels between what really happened and versus the movie version of it. But I think that's one of the elements of this film, the nature of this story that does make it a much better story than Bullitt. It's based on something that really happened, and it's told in a way that just feels real and honest and just gritty, and you just feel like you're in there really in this world with these cops that really were experiencing this sort of stuff.
I think you're talking about sort of the gritty feel of it. I feel like we've been moving through the film backwards, but the way the film opens, I think really sets a stage for this sort of realization for the audience that this is going to be a different kind of police movie.
Yeah.
And it's another one. I wonder. I mean, what do you know besides the reaction of the police to what was his name, the
Randy Jurgensen.
Randy, and the shooting in the back sequence. The reaction of this film by the police community. Do you have any? Did you find any sort of reference to that in general? How they felt about it? It was very positive, negative.
I think they thought it was positive. I mean, there was they had Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso on set as technical consultants a lot of the time, and Roy Scheider and Gene Hackman worked with them a lot to really pull from the realities of it. And they would actually go into scenes and kind of rehearse with these guys who would say, no, you would do it like this, you do it like this. And they went out with them for a couple weeks beforehand on real raids, and they would show them, like they would take them into bars and stuff, along with William Friedkin, who would go on these trips too. They'd go into a bar and they'd really toss it like they do the scene where Doyle and Russo go into the bar and they kind of, have everyone up against the wall. They have all the drugs out on the floor. Doyle makes that milkshake, mixing up all the drugs in the drinks and kind of ruining all the profits for all those people, right. I guess. And I mean, this is stuff that Eddie Egan and Sonny Grosso really would do. And so they introduced a lot of these elements to the story that weren't necessarily in the script, but that they pulled from the real life of these cops who were really down there doing it and were able to translate the realities of life on the street to this. And even with the nature of Doyle's character being racist and just not being nice to anybody, and just seeing them doing all these shakeups when they go into the bars and stuff, it becomes a really interesting portrayal of a cop that, they were a little nervous about putting this out there, but even when they showed it to African American audiences, people they actually were excited that they saw this on the screen because this is what they saw. They really saw cops shaking people up like this, and they're like, "Yeah, finally, we're seeing you portraying Whitey as he really is,"
Mm-hmm.
And so it's pretty interesting. And obviously, it's different to things like Shaft, where we're getting an African American cop who's now in the position of power and doing this sort of stuff. But seeing a cop really acting like a cop did, I think. It made it more real to people. It made it seem like the filmmakers were observing what the realities were, as opposed to kind of the dragnet. And I talked about this last week as well, but kind of that dragnet police procedural from the 50s where everything was by the books, ma'am. And it seemed so much a little hackneyed and maybe behind the times. And I think and I don't know if cops appreciated it or the audiences or what, but I mean, I think it obviously did tap into a nerve of people. I mean, this is, early 70s, so things had definitely kind of changed culturally in the States. And so I think people tapped into that, and they liked seeing this more realistic portrayal of cops as, people saw them as they really were.
Well, and that's what you get, I think, in the very first sequence. We have Popeye Doyle as a Santa Claus that that not in the first sequence, I should say. The first sequence you open up in France, but in the first sequence in the U.S., we have Popeye Doyle as Santa Claus and Russo as they're undercover on the street as street vendors, and they are they're looking after these drug dealers. And what we see is this foot chase where Cloudy gets cut, and these guys go crazy on this black drug dealer in the streets, and there's this wide shot where you see them tackle him, kick him. He's already down, but they go crazy on this guy.
Yeah.
And that sets the stage for what is as you say, what ends up being kind of I don't know. I mean, you bring up sort of the racist tendencies of these characters, and I wonder if Popeye is necessarily racist or just hates everybody.
That's my sense. Because I mean, even when he makes the comment about that's what do you expect from a derogatory N-word, and Russo is just like, well, hey, he could have been white. And he's just like, that's what you get for trusting anybody.
Yeah, and at the end, he does the same thing about he says that when the car is stolen in the junkyard, right? Mm-hmm. And they find the car and they're the thieves. He's derogatory S word about the Mexicans, and
right.
And he saw taking these cars and robbing cars. That's the guy just hates everybody, and I wonder if this sort of amalgamation of kind of rage is that cultural interpretation of police against everyone of the 70s that we sort of are saddled with, and just what Popeye Doyle represents to that. As much as he is, he represents the great sort of man rage that I find so satisfying about this movie. He also represents all that is sort of kind of ill about the us versus them kind of system.
Yeah.
That we deal with.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Hackman actually had a really challenging time playing this character. He couldn't connect with that nature of him. He felt he was a very just a two-dimensional character. He didn't really feel fully fleshed out ever. And he actually had quite a few arguments in the beginning of the making of the film with Friedkin and D'Antoni about it, and was so frustrated because he couldn't tap into that anger, and he even dealing with Eddie Egan, who was on set, he had a hard time connecting to him because he just didn't connect with that kind of violent tendency and that kind of bitter kind of hatred for everybody that he had and suspicion of everybody. And he really struggled, and so much that they shot that first sequence right toward the beginning of the film, and it really wasn't working out very well. Friedkin wasn't very happy with how it was all coming together, and Gene Hackman just said, you know what, if you need me to get off this film, you need to find somebody else, that's fine, I'll quit. And Friedkin luckily convinced Gene Hackman that he was the right guy and that he should stay on board. And he said, no, let's just revisit that scene, and we'll come back and we'll redo that scene at the end of the film once you've kind of settled into the character some more. Because Gene Hackman, I mean, he's really struggling with having to hit this guy, this poor guy that they're just giving the shakedown to. I believe it was Alan Weeks, and he and so they did. They came back and reshot that whole scene at the end of the film after they had lived in these roles for weeks and weeks and really gotten a better sense of the character. And Gene Hackman finally had a better sense of Doyle and all of that. And they came back to that scene at the end and they reshot it. And they got it done like in a half day. They just had, and they improvised it, and they just really had the rhythm of it, and they had the feel of those cop characters finally. And it was much easier for them to do, and it brought that much more reality to it, and made it, I think, a fantastic way to start the film and just throw you right into the mix with who these characters are.
I absolutely agree, and really sets the tone for the entire film. I think it's fantastic. Other notable performances.
Well, I think Fernando Rey is absolutely fantastic as Charnier.
Mm-hmm.
He's and the funny story about him is Friedkin told his casting director when she was trying to help him cast that role, and he said, "Oh, there's this fantastic actor. He appeared in some of Luis Buñuel's films, and I would love to have him. He looks the part. He's got a great vibe to him." And she's like, "Oh, sure." And so she called, and it's like, "Oh, well, he's Fernando Rey. He's available. He's interested, and he wants the job." And Friedkin was like, "Great, I'll pick him up at the airport. This is fantastic." He goes to pick him up at the airport, and he recognizes the guy, but it's not the one that he was picturing that he wanted them to cast. And he picks him up and takes him back to the hotel, and he says, "Oh, excuse me, I got to go make a phone call real quick." He goes up to his hotel room. He calls the casting director and just goes off on her because he's so upset that they cast the wrong guy. And he's like, he's definitely was, in the film, but he's not the one that I wanted. And he was so upset, but then he's just like, he really thought about it, and he came back to Fernando Rey and decided to cast him because he did play such a great opposite to the Jimmy Doyle character. He had a kind of a very suave, debonair, this kind of Frenchman who lived the lush life look to him. He was older. He's got that great beard. And it works so well for the film. And he ended up casting the other guy, and I can't remember his name right now, the Spanish actor. He ended up casting him in Sorcerer when he did that later in the 70s, again with Roy Scheider. But I think, to the film's credit, it was a real happy accident that he ended up with Fernando Rey in the role.
A happy accident indeed. The guy is fantastic, and I think it is, when you watch, you just watch his interaction with the police. It's just he really owns that sort of protected bad guy role. He is the guy who wanders New York with impunity, and I think he just absolutely dominates the cat and mouse kind of a feel of this movie.
Yeah, and he's great because he does always seem so much more aloof than all of that. He's above all of that. It's really fun.
Yeah. Let's see. We've talked a little bit about our love of Roy Scheider.
He's just in so many great 70s movies. We're going to have the Roy Scheider awesome 70s movies list.
Well, I sort of feel like that. We need to go back and add that to add a series for Roy, because this is one of those movies where, one of the things that's great about Roy Scheider is his ability to be a utility player. Mm-hmm. In these movies. I mean, he ends up being, he sort of fills a role as the partner, mm-hmm. But he is also, he fills the role as the sort of moral balance, mm-hmm. right, to Popeye. But he's just so interesting to watch in his own right. And the transition that he makes from when they're tearing that car apart, and he is the investigative police officer, and they're helping to just watch him move through the car, and then go in and actually talk to the Frenchman, in that you could tell that sort of overly helpful, sarcastic New York cop vibe is just so wonderful to watch. Oh, yeah. No, well, we get a lot of cars here in New York, mm-hmm. Which is just fantastic. I just love watching him interact in these little moments that he takes ownership of.
Yeah, I mean, he seemed a little surprised that he was nominated for supporting actor for this film, but I mean, honestly, he brings so much to the role, and it's he has a great presence. I mean, I think it was probably right that Ben Johnson won for Last Picture Show, but Roy Scheider really is a presence that is important and very felt in this film.
Absolutely.
And this was the same year as Clute, actually.
Yeah, it was early in his, particularly early in his career, and then Clute and French Connection come out, and then it was on to a really terrific 70s and early 80s for Roy.
Yeah.
Although, man, the guy was active.
He's been very active in all through his life.
Yeah. All right. So, did you ever see Iron Cross?
I didn't.
I didn't either, but that one really interests me. It was just because it was released so far after his death. Let's see. He died February 10th, 2008, and the movie was released in 2011.
Interesting.
Yeah. Makes me want to catch that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Who else stands out to you that you want to talk
about? Well, I think Marcel Bazoufi playing Nicolai, the French assassin, I think just does a great job. He's got a great look to him, and he actually did stunts back in France, and I think it holds true more than anywhere else in the film when he falls backward down the stairs after getting shot, which no one knew he was going to do. So I mean, I gotta just mention him because it's just, I mean,
wait. So wait a minute.
Say that I would never want to do.
Say that again. So he fell backwards after being shot, but that was not scripted. That was just him,
Yeah, he was gonna die, but and he kind of told them, he's like, I really don't want to do this, and they weren't sure.
This is gonna hurt.
What sort of fall he was gonna do, but after the squibs go off, I mean, if you watch, he just falls backwards right on the stairs and rolls all the way down to the bottom.
God, he really does. He really does. It's so great.
Yeah,
it's a
Hackman
double.
Wasn't expecting that at all. It was I think he was a little taken back that he actually did that.
But and yet, both of them play that so well, and Hackman just sort of collapses at the bottom of the stairs as Bazoufi kicks him in the gut.
Yeah. Oh man, but it leads to this. Just another mention to this this documentary style that Friedkin brought to the film. I mean, he came from the world of documentaries, and so he really wanted to lend this documentary style to this film. And he would actually rehearse scenes with the actors, but not let his crew on set, so that when the camera operator came in, the camera operator didn't know where the actors were going to go, and so the actors would do their thing, and the camera operator would just have to follow and just hope they kept him in their shot. But it led to that documentary style. And even with Bazoufi falling down the stairs like he does, it's just one of those things that they weren't really planning. It didn't really, nobody was expecting if it would happen that way or not. And it just lends to that documentary style that they were just capturing things as they happened that they weren't expecting to happen.
Yeah, this movie is a celebration of it.
Yeah, it really did kind of start a lot of that kind of pseudo documentary, gritty style of filmmaking. It really began with this film.
And so we talked about the awards that the film won, but in terms of performance in the box office,
it did well. I mean, this film, I believe Friedkin said that it cost $1.5 million to make. They initially wanted $3 million. They had a real hard time getting the funding for this. I think they said they went to 7 or 8 studios trying to get the funds for it. Sometimes a couple times to certain studios, and they just kept getting turned down. Interestingly enough, guess who said yes to it? Our buddy Richard D. Zanuck, when he was still heading up Fox.
That's because he's a smart guy.
He's a smart guy, and he actually told them, he's like, okay, they wanted $3 million. He said, you can have $1.5 million to make it, and you have to get started within 5 or 6 weeks because we're all going to be fired shortly thereafter. because he already knew, about the fact that his father was going to have to fire him and all of that stuff that was going on in the works. But he very smartly must have seen the potential with this film and knew something was there. And so he gave them the money to get it going. And thank God he did, because it turned into a great film. Like I said, it cost $1.5 million. Friedkin said that they ended up going about $300,000 over, which at the time was a pretty big deal. But, everybody ended up feeling that it was okay. Domestically, it went on to gross $51.7 million. Did a great job. I don't see anything about anything internationally as far as what it did around the world. But I mean, going from a $1.5 million budget, or I guess by the time they got it all spent, $1.8 million, to make just domestically almost $52 million, they did a very good job.
Yeah, that's a good bet.
And they got a sequel out of it a few years later.
Yeah, have you seen the sequel?
I have. It's another great example of Doyle's obsession as he then goes to France in pursuit of Charnier, and it's an interesting film. I don't like it nearly as much as I like the first one. I've actually only seen it the one time, but it does have some great stuff in it, though. It's worth watching just to kind of get a feel. If you want to feel that sense of success of him actually capturing Charnier, then you should watch the second one.
Well, and that's what I think is so so interesting about it, is that they got the sequel and they got Hackman and Rey. That it's not just a spiritual sequel. It's it's a real legitimate sequel that performed really comparably poorly. In the box office, it seems like it sort of puttered out, but it was a John Frankenheimer film. So, that's I mentioned how much I love the taglines of these of the movie posters,
right? And
the French Connection. There's never been a better time for a movie like this. And the the tagline on the 1975 movie poster for French Connection 2 is this is the climax. Really, people? Really?
Well, I guess you could say, the first one does feel like, anticlimactic. You don't get to see him get his guy. So It is kind of a funny tag. Yeah. There was somebody at Fox who actually wanted the tagline for the first one to be something, and I wish I could remember exactly what it was, but it's like, this is the film that celebrates everything great about American violence or something. It's like, what kind of tag is that? What's it saying about the American culture?
Oh, that's too funny. Okay, yeah, that's the American culture. We get to do a podcast in which we laugh about the failure of our American culture.
Right.
What else do you have to add before we wrap up?
Well, I just it was an interesting year, 1971, especially as far as the Oscars go. The French Connection was up for Best Picture along with A Clockwork Orange, Fiddler on the Roof, The Last Picture Show, and Nicholas and Alexandra. This was the first time that a rated X film was nominated for Best Picture, and that was A Clockwork Orange. And because of that, a lot of people refused to participate in the Oscars. A lot of stars refused to present awards at the Oscars because of A Clockwork Orange being acknowledged. And but a lot of people, I think, probably look back and think that of the 5 films nominated, A Clockwork Orange may be the best film on the list. I mean, Kubrick certainly has his fans. I really like A Clockwork Orange. It's definitely a hard film to watch. The Last Picture Show, I think, is one of the best films of the 70s. I think it's a stellar achievement. Bogdanovich did a great job with that film. And I would be hard-pressed to say which I would pick of the 3 if I were having to vote for Best Picture. I probably wouldn't vote for Fiddler on the Roof as much as I like it, and I've never seen Nicholas and Alexandra. But there is something about the French Connection that always has stuck with me. It's a visceral film like A Clockwork Orange, but it's a much easier film to watch. It has a lot of the grittiness and drama that The Last Picture Show does, but the way that it brings it all together in this gritty, realistic story of cops and the chase and all of that, I probably would still go with The French Connection just because, I love the film so much. But I'm really hard pressed to pick between the three. Just a lot of good choices that year. It's another great year of great films. And then Clute thrown in the mix. I mean, it's a good year.
Well, and you think about that. I mean, think about for me, the one that stands out as one we haven't mentioned yet is Dirty Harry. That hit that year, and it seems like Dirty Harry is, in terms of a character of, you know, sort of the do anything cop.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's a movie that did not perform as well as The French Connection in the box office, and yet I think carries with it a you know, arguably a more memorable title character. Obviously, it got, you know, it got additional play as the years kind of went on, and other Dirty Harry movies are made. But between Dirty Harry and The French Connection, I think French Connection is a better film. It's certainly a
by
more
far.
You know, more interesting film to watch. And yet 1971 had both of these you know, both of these films kickstart. Man, 1971 is a fascinating year. This is one factoid I had not put in the sort of space of context. The very first permanent IMAX projection system was installed in Toronto in 1971.
Wow, that's surprising to me.
Right? That was surprising to me as well.
Yeah.
And here we are talking so much about IMAX, you know, now, so many years later. Fascinating,
right.
Fascinating.
The other great cop film that I did briefly mention earlier, but was Shaft, that came out the same year, which was a very a different take on kind of almost beginning, I guess, the whole blaxploitation celebration in films. A really interesting cop film that really does take a different look at, you know, kind of the world of cops when it's this tough black cop, Shaft, Shut Your Mouth, and all of that. It's just another great cop film from the era. But I still would have to put French Connection on top of that one as well.
You know, the highest, I think it was the highest grossing or the first. The highest grossing independent film. Also, you know, you're talking about that sort of blaxploitation. This is not necessarily in that vein. It's Melvin Van Peebles' Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Badass Song.
Right.
Which hit the top 10 in top grossing films in 1971.
Yeah.
Right behind Bedknobs and Broomsticks, who many don't realize was almost a blaxploitation film, but due to some last-minute casting changes,
Angela Lansbury they ended up with instead. Shut your mouth.
Shut your mouth. That was actually going to be the tagline for Bedknobs and Broomsticks, but they I think wisely, better angels intervened.
It was because it was already taken. They're like, oh man.
Missed opportunity. All right. Next,
Isaac Hayes. All right. We'll just Angela Lansbury.
Shut your mouth.
Oh, there's a mashup I'd love to see.
Oh, seriously. All right. So we're continuing our best car chase series next week with
yes, as someone as Krista rightfully threw out on our Facebook page. Oh, you better be doing French Connection and Ronin. We're like, oh, right? Oddly enough,
we're doing French Connection and then Ronin. I am very excited to talk about Ronin. This is one of my this is the of the movies in my collection that I can put on any time as just kind of background. Like, this is a movie I use often. It is the highest play count in my collection of movies, is Ronin. I love this movie. I never get sick of it. So I'm very excited to talk about this movie. And we are moving moving up through time. And I think we nailed the We nailed the 70s. And now it's time to move on.
There are plenty of other great car chases that we're skipping between 1971 and 1998.
Yeah. But I bring it up because it's a Frankenheimer film, and since John Frankenheimer ended up or had done the French Connection 2, and yet we include him here in our best car chases, and he has had other great car chases
and other great films.
Yes,
he's a fantastic filmmaker, and we'll definitely have to do a Frankenheimer series one of these days.
Yeah, fantastic film.
And then there was The Island of Dr. Moreau, which we won't be talking about.
All right. I think I'm done. You done?
I am done.
Thanks so much for joining us, everybody. We're out of here.
We wanted to take a moment to thank you for your continued support over the years. It's hard to believe that we have been having weekly, in-depth discussions about movies since 2011.
That's right, 12 years and counting. Producing this show is a labor of love for us, but it does require a lot of time and effort each week.
If you enjoy our podcast and would love to help keep it going, there are some easy ways you can show your support. One is by using our Originals page to shop for the original source material that movies we've discussed were based on.
That's right. In Season 1 alone, we covered 13 films adapted from books or plays, from Charlie Kaufman's adaptation to David Fincher adaptations like Fight Club.
In Season 2, we covered even more, like Powell and Pressburger's The Red Shoes and The African Queen from our series about legendary cinematographer Jack Cardiff.
We can't forget about the 4 Jason Bourne movies we talked about. Love those movies. Well, the original trilogy, at least.
For our Richard D. Zanuck series, we did Jaws, Rush, Big Fish, and more. And for our horror series, we talked about John Carpenter's The Thing, which was adapted from Who Goes There?
We did our first great car chase series with movies like Bullitt, The French Connection, and Drive. And for the holidays, we did Preston Sturgis's Christmas in July.
We had a great John Huston series with adaptations like The Maltese Falcon and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
And for our baseball series, Moneyball with Brad Pitt. Have I told you lately how much I love that movie?
Yeah, I think you have. Plus, our Magician series and Heist film series had adaptations as well.
Tons of page-to-screen gems. Listeners can find the details and links to the original material at thenextreel.com/originals. Every book, play, or movie you buy through our links helps support the show, and it's no extra cost to you.
So dive in and get your next read today. thenextreel.com/originals has all the films adapted from other sources that not only we have covered, but all of the shows on the Next Reel family of podcasts. Check it out and get reading.
Support the show and build your reading list. It's a win-win. Head to thenextreel.com/originals.